So we thought, huh? वो आप सोच लीजिए. नहीं. So we thought we should in any case come down and start chit-chatting. The press release will be here soon. Relax, Hariharan. Relax. Tab tak we, do any of us have a problem in having chai coffee? No, na? Nahi, na? Acha. Bibu, just see if we can get tea and coffee all round, please. Thank you. Okay. So, anyway, as I said, the press release will be coming. As you can imagine, the elephant in the room is Adani Hindenburg. Now, I don't know why all of you expect that we will say anything about it. Because in the first place, our standard answer is we never comment on entity-specific matters. On top of that, the matter is before the Supreme Court. We never comment on sub judice matters. So there is absolutely no question of our commenting on that. So we will discuss all issues which are related to the significant number of policy matters that the board approved today. But I can see Lata saying, "Oh, mujhe aana hi nahi chahiye tha." Menika is also thinking, "Arey, galti kiya." Yeah, you're here. That's right. Oh, all right. Oh, wow. This is very good. What? Yes. This is our, yes, this is on record. You thought we started the conference? No, hum to chai pani pi rahe the. Normally the conference starts when the press release comes, then all of you have a little bit of time to do your sending of pics and quick WhatsApping. My God, the speed is amazing. Sometimes I wish I could WhatsApp that quickly. So we are just doing chai pani. But no, but this is, well, yes, in a way, yes, that this, we are not going to be able to comment on this matter at all because A, it's a specific entity related, and B, it is sub judice. The matter is before Supreme Court. It would be very inappropriate for us to say anything about it at all.
Can we ask you about the extent to which the investigation has progressed?
Nothing.
In the sense.
Yeah.
So let me finish that. I mean, you were doing in concert with other agencies. Have you sought the help of, say, ED or TRI? Have you got the help?
So Lata, see, that is exactly what, if you see the Supreme Court order, it instructs us to give precisely this update to the committee. So it would be inappropriate for us to share with the media and the public at large what we have been instructed by the highest court of the land to go and report to the committee. So that's exactly what we've been advised to do, right? So we won't be able to do that, unfortunately. What is that? Remind me. Acha. So on that, I have something to say, which is that, I've been asked this question quite frequently over the last couple of months, saying now that you've finished 1 year in SEBI, what is it you want to do going forward? And obviously, when you want to deliver something in year 2, you have to start the work in year 1, right? Otherwise, it doesn't get delivered in year 2. So one of the areas that SEBI has in any case been looking into and speaking to a bunch of people is the whole issue of spirit of the law versus letter of the law. Okay, so when we engage with other people on spirit of the law versus letter of the law, we can hardly violate that ourselves by speaking about this issue in a convoluted way or in a golmol way or in a jalebi Angrezi way. It would violate the spirit of what we are supposed to do and not supposed to do. So we have to stay with that. And in fact, that is our urging to many people, and we've been engaged with many people who we consider third-party fiduciaries in the ecosystem, right? So whether they are law firms, whether they are accounting and auditing firms, whether they are investment bankers, we consider all of them to be third-party fiduciaries, and the market relies on what they say. And therefore, we've been actually very actively engaged that in the coming year, we want to take forward this concept of spirit of the law versus letter of the law. And we've been seeking feedback on what we as a regulator need to do about it. So, for instance, a very valid feedback that has come to us is that why should the regulator be surprised when this happens? Because the regulator's actions are also reinforcing the same. So if somebody has violated the letter of the law but not the spirit, we will take action. But if they violated the spirit of the law but not the letter of the law, we find ourselves unable to take action, or even where we take action, it is overturned. So therefore, the system is all part and parcel of this phenomenon, and therefore, we as a regulator have an equal role to play compared to the ecosystem, the third-party fiduciaries, in solving for this problem. So we certainly intend to take it up in the coming years. So we will ourselves not violate any spirit of the law. You can interpret the. We never display investigation reports. We never display investigation reports. We only display orders. We will follow the advice of the Supreme Court. Whatever the Supreme Court has said, we are duty bound to follow. That's right. We will respect the orders of the Supreme Court.
So that status report will not be shared first with the government, or will it be shared first with the finance ministry?
Why?
I'm simply asking.
Is that what the Supreme Court order said?
No, it doesn't.
So we will follow the letter and spirit of the Supreme Court order.
And that report will not be shared publicly unless the Supreme Court decides to release.
That's not part of there's no public sharing as per the Supreme Court.
Even before Supreme Court had asked, the investigation was already on by SEBI.
That again is going into the realm of status of the investigation. And now that we have the press release in hand, so I would request, of course, I know that you will want to send that off, so we're quite happy to be silent for a few minutes while you send off whatever you need to send immediately, and then we can start again.
Hi, can some press releases be distributed this side also?
Oh, sorry?
they have been quite amazed at the progress that India is making in this space. And when they asked us what the secret sauce was, we actually said the secret sauce was not so secret, because every single piece of what we have done has been co-created with the market. So whether it is the ESG proposals that you will see today, which I will take you through, or it was T+1 implementation, you know that we are the first major market in the world to implement T+1, or whether it is swing pricing, which we are one of the few jurisdictions that has a very robust framework for swing pricing. All of this has been co-created with the industry through a very rigorous process of consultation and co-creation. I think we go well beyond consultation to a process of co-creation. So right at the start, if we look at ESG disclosures, I think one of the very important things that we are doing today is introducing the concept of BRSR core, which really means it's like a core ESG. And if you look at the numbers, the normal BRSR reporting that we had outlined, which was in line with the global norms, has about 800 parameters. Naturally, many corporates expressed difficulty in being able to do that in a rigorous way, first of all, to disclose, and then more importantly, to have assurance on 800 parameters was a very, very difficult task. So what we did was we sat down with the industry and co-created something called BRSR Core, which has a sum total of only 41 or 46, 49 parameters. And above that, there are few, but those are all derived numbers, like the intensity ratios. So it's been brought down to under 50. Not only that, in terms of what is the manner in which assurance will be given on each of these parameters has also been articulated. Guidance has been given on that. And that guidance was approved by the working group only after it was back-tested. So there was a proposal that these will be the parameters, this is how we will give assurance. We went out and back-tested it with a set of 10 large conglomerates. Only when it was clear, and there were some changes because of that, right? Because when the feedback comes that when you actually implement on the ground. So with that, we now have this very powerful tool called BRSR Core. And this is what will take us into the realm of assured ESG disclosure and therefore assured ESG ratings far ahead of any other jurisdiction on the planet. So this is a very important move for us. The other collateral benefit of the core BRSR was most jurisdictions are again struggling with the issue of supply chain ESG. So upstream, downstream, suppliers and dealers and so on. Everybody knows and understands that there's a vulnerability there to greenwashing, because if an entity is wanting to develop a good ESG score, it can simply outsource either upstream or downstream the aspects of its activities which are not giving it a good ESG score. So it's very easy to circumvent this, and it can result in potential greenwashing. So therefore, we are saying we must bring in the supply chain, but because the supply chain will naturally consist of smaller companies, we must bring it in only for BRSR core, only these under 50 parameters. And more importantly, we don't want 100% coverage. So your top suppliers until you reach cumulatively 75%, your top customers until you reach a cumulative 75%. So it's much easier to comply. So there's a huge ease of doing business here, but at the same time, you are achieving a high level of assurance. So this, again, we think is a very significant move that we are making, and we think that a large number of people are looking forward to seeing how this will work. Also, just to highlight that in the core BRSR, we have incorporated certain aspects of ESG that are extremely relevant to emerging markets. So traditionally, since this space has come from the developed markets, many of the emerging market relevant parameters were never included. We have now included them. And again, we find that when we speak at international fora, many of the emerging markets are looking forward to seeing what is it that we are doing in this area. Then moving on to the issue of the ratings themselves, we believe that this needs to be a regulated area. As you know, globally, before the 2008 crisis, credit rating agencies were also not regulated, and many people had said to us that, global best practice does not require credit rating agencies to be regulated. After 2008, they all changed their mind. So we believe in not allowing a problem to first blow up and then only address it. We think that it's important that there should be, right from the start, a regulation and a way in which these entities conduct themselves. It is again very much a disclosure-based and a code of conduct-based approach, but yes, they need to be regulated entities. In terms of ESG investing, again, we are all very conscious of the fact that more and more money is flowing into these funds. Risk of greenwashing must be minimized. And therefore, we are introducing two things. One is, again, facilitating the growth of this market. The mutual funds, as you know, have restrictions on how many schemes they can launch. So up till now, there was only one possibility of launching one ESG scheme. We've now created ESG as a category. So within that category, there are now almost half a dozen different approaches to ESG. So in short, you can have more variety of ESG schemes going forward. So this is a developmental effort which is going to happen. But at the same time, there is greater emphasis on disclosures so that there is the investor, when they are investing in an ESG scheme, they know exactly what they're putting their money into. The second part is a linked proposal, which, as I said, is the framework around which we are saying that the ESG rating providers must be governed. So there must be transparency in terms of their rating rationale. Conflict of interest, very important, because as we know, the audit firms in the past have come under tremendous scrutiny on account of conflict of interest, that on the one hand, they have assurance type activities, and on the other hand, they have consulting type activities, and the two are not really separated in a meaningful way. So right at the start, we are wanting to make sure that that doesn't happen. So these rating providers can provide ratings and assurance type services, but they cannot then go and have a conflict of interest in terms of consulting. The third is also very important, particularly again from the perspective of India and emerging markets. You can have an ESG rating which is a static rating which is based on today's situation. But in order to facilitate the flow of transition finance, and particularly economies like ourselves need that transition finance to take the entire industrial sector from point A to point B, and therefore the way in which we have structured what the rating agencies will do will also facilitate the creation of a rating which will facilitate that funds can flow into an entity for the specific purpose of facilitating transition. Lastly, of course, as I said, because we are now bringing in BRSR core, we will perhaps be the first country in the world to have ESG ratings which are based on assured data. With that, we'll move on to the secondary market. So we had said many months ago that we will come with an ASBA-like facility for secondary market trades. It's now going to become a manifest reality. Of course, system changes are needed, so the implementation date is a little bit away. But practically all the modalities have been ironed out. This has been once again co-created with the brokers and with the clearing corporations and the exchanges. So at this stage, we envisage that it will be optional both for the brokers to offer to their investors as well as to the investors as to whether they want to avail or not avail of this facility. But we hope that like ASBA did, and it picked up popularity so much, we hope that once the system stabilizes and people start to see the benefits, and some of the top brokers, because we know there's a fair amount of concentration, right? The top 10 brokers account for, I think, almost 70% of the customers in terms of retail. So we hope that the transition will be rapid once we actually get implemented. But this, we think, is another very important milestone in the way in which trading is done in our country. Again, I must share with you, fresh out of the ISCO oven, that global jurisdictions are just amazed. You know, everywhere else in the world, the model is a B2B model. The exchanges or the clearing corps talk to the clearing members, and it stops there. We are perhaps very unique. We don't have omnibus accounts. We don't have any of that. And the entire chain is completely visible and transparent thanks to the technology. So I've started now referring to this as really the India market stack, because nowhere else in the world is there a market stack in terms of technology which allows for us to go from B to B to C. And for crores and crores of investors, you know that we had implemented the pledge-repledge system for securing and protecting the shares of the investors. We are now on this, I would say, very important point where we are now going to protect the cash of the investors. And therefore, you're going to see that our India stack in terms of markets is going to be, again, a world-beating stack, barring none. The second thing in the secondary market is a complementary proposal which relates to upstreaming of client funds. You know that typically client money goes and resides with the intermediaries, the brokers, in the form of pool accounts. We had recently implemented a regulatory provision where once in a quarter on the same day, all the money had to be returned to the clients. And you recollect that it was, we ourselves were shocked when we saw some of the numbers. And then we realized just how much money is actually sitting in the system. And again, it brings to light how in many parts of the world today, for instance, many regulators are worrying about the funds which are lying with broker-dealers. Okay, it's become a topic of discussion amongst regulators in terms of systemic risk. And here we are, where we are saying that we are now going to have zero systemic risk on account of this, because all the money of the clients that comes into the broker network will get upstreamed to the clearing corporations, will get lien marked into the clearing corporations, and we will no longer carry that risk at all. So again, landmark in terms of the way in which our technology will work. While we were in the process of designing this, and as I said, co-creating it with the market, we came across another very interesting facet which we have put down for our next year's KRAs, right, Anand? Next year's KRAs, which is that we want, it's a bit like saying portability across, that many investors have been asking us for portability across DPs. We think there is also a requirement for portability across clearing corporations, because while we are very focused on mitigation of cybersecurity related risks, these risks are a reality in today's world. We cannot underestimate them. And therefore, the need to think about portability across clearing corporations is also important. And if we have to have portability across clearing corporations, we must have portability of the collateral. So the collateral which is lien marked to clearing corporation A should be instantly transferable in terms of lien marked to clearing corporation B. And that mechanism we are now going to take up, and that's, as I said, a KRA for next year, that how are we going to work that system, and that will de-risk us even more as compared to where we are today. The next one, again continuing in secondary markets, is about amendment to the stockbroker regulations to bring in a provision which casts a responsibility on the brokers to actually monitor for fraud and other market abuse. Now, the roots of this provision and this thought process actually came to us from the industry, from the brokers, where they shared with us some of the best practices that they are following already. Okay? And I would just like to, by way of illustration, highlight one case which I thought was particularly important, and how important it is that a broker does what is right. Okay? So this fairly large broker came and said to me that when they are doing KYC of a new customer, one of the first things they look for is to see the age of the investor and the date of the PAN card. So if the age of the investor is, let's say, 40, 45, something like that, and the PAN card is very recent, it's an immediate red flag to them that this is likely a mule account which is being set up for misuse, because a person who is 45 and having first-time PAN card, where is the wherewithal for him to be trading in the market? And therefore, most likely, this is a mule account. They turn down the customer. They refuse to open the account. Now, I'm saying there are different brokers. There are some brokers who talk to us about how they are using technology. Some of the larger tech-based brokers talked about how they use technology to identify. So another broker came and told us that they had this client who was just making inordinate sums of money, profit, day after day after day. And he said, statistically, this was an impossibility. We shut the guy's account. Okay? Which obviously, so I'm saying this is what brokers are doing today. They are showing great responsible behavior, but we need that to be implemented across the board, because equally the feedback that came on the other side was that while we have all these very good practices, we also have some brokers, a very small minority, but we also have brokers who are constantly colluding in the opening of mule accounts, in the facilitation of mule accounts, and in basically facilitating all the kind of pump and dump that you have been seeing recently. We passed some very interesting orders. So you are being able to see what all is going on, and we are told that, of course, very often a small minority of the brokers are actively involved in this kind of misconduct as well. So both of these put together have led us to bringing in this regulation. So that is really the regulatory intent, to capture the best practices and also to mitigate collusion. The last item in the secondary market piece is, and well, it could have been in secondary market, it could have been in mutual funds, is a regulatory framework for index providers. So the board has today approved an in principle proposal to say that we should bring these under the regulation, and certain details are being worked out now. But again, like we said in the case of ESG rating, we believe that this needs to be done sooner than later. Let us not wait for a LIBOR kind of a scandal to break out and then say we need to regulate. Let us make sure that we have a base level of very simple, light touch, conduct-based regulation to begin with. No. They just happen to be subsidiaries of the stock exchanges, but there is no provision in our law to regulate them at all, not even one. Sorry. They are either subsidiaries of exchanges or of credit rating agencies. They are not regulated. We don't have a stitch in place for regulating them. We now move on to the mutual fund piece, and we are absolutely delighted to share. The Honorable Finance Minister had made an announcement in one of the budget speeches about a corporate debt market development fund, which was to function as a backstop facility for mutual funds in the event of a market dislocation in the bond market. And we're very happy to share with you that that whole initiative has made a very, very significant progress. And therefore, today, the board approved the creation of a new chapter in our AIF regulations to facilitate the creation of this fund. So basically what this fund will do is it will sit there on standby and just be on standby in normal times. But whenever there is a significant market dislocation which warrants sovereign intervention, so it has to be really something significant, not minor volatility, but a significant event happens, then just like you have developed markets who instantly trigger asset purchase programs, we will have the ability to, with the press of a button, we would be able to activate this fund, and it would go in there and become the buyer of last resort from the mutual funds. This is an initiative which will be initially funded and the corpus brought in by the mutual fund schemes as well as by the AMCs themselves. So very important to know that the AMCs themselves are putting skin in the game, their own money, not the scheme money, but their own money. So this is a very important milestone, both for the bond market and for the debt mutual fund market. So we hope that this fund will now, so whatever regulations were required to facilitate this have been approved by the board today. And so we will very soon see this backstop facility coming to life. It will be managed by SBI AMC, and the entire structure has now been approved. And it's something that I must say that the industry worked very, very hard on, and it's finally seeing the light of day. The next one, again, in relation to mutual funds, there has been a lot of debate and discussion around what is the role of the trustees in an AMC vis-a-vis the role of the AMC itself. And I think that when we had an unfortunate series of events last time, we took a very, very serious look at this and decided that we need to clarify on this. So essentially now what this set of proposals is saying is two things. Number one, it is saying that the principal focus of the trustees is in areas where there is a potential conflict of interest between the shareholders of the AMC and the unit holders of the schemes. That's where you have to focus. So a lot of the procedural and the operational and the tick box stuff has been removed. Saying, please don't bother with it. That's not your job. That's not what we need you to do. We need you to focus on areas where you, as the fiduciary, taking responsibility for the unit holders, you are guarding against conflict of interest with the shareholders of the AMC. So that role is now very, very crystal clear. There are a lot of modalities built in, again, all co-created with industry as to how they are to go about that. In addition, is a very important point which our advisory committee advised us. I must say we went back and forth on it a couple of times, but we finally decided that what the advisory committee was telling us was in fact good advice, and that was that the AMC itself must be given a huge responsibility for unit holder interest, and not just as a custodian of the shareholders of the AMC. So now a new committee is going to be formed called the Unit Holder Protection Committee. This will be a committee of the board of the AMC. So the AMC has to own fully. They cannot now say, oh, but the trustees were supposed to look after the unit holder. I was only supposed to look after the interest of the shareholders of the AMC. They can no longer say that because they are required to have a unit holder protection committee and to ensure that they are not compromising. So they are taking responsibility as well for not compromising the interests of the unit holders. Next is an ease of doing business proposal. We had promised to the industry that after 2-3 years of a lot of regulatory tightening, I would say, the evidence of that has been very clear. If you see that, for instance, in the debt mutual funds and in the debt market, given the turn of the interest rate cycle, there has been significant redemption in the debt mutual funds. And despite that, it's been smooth. There's not been a murmur. It's been like a hot knife through butter. There is not been a ripple in the market because the entire industry has taken the whole process of risk management in open-ended funds to heart, and they've truly implemented, if I were to say spirit of the law, this is one industry in respect of liquidity risk management in debt funds, truly spirit of the law has been followed. And therefore, we have seen absolutely no problem in what otherwise would have been a huge issue, as we've seen overseas what is happening, SVB Bank, etc. So we had promised the industry that, with all of that that's said and done, we need to and we will need to bring in a lot more opportunity for growth and liberalization. So here it is. Essentially, it is addressed at the core of saying we would like more innovation in the industry, more players in the industry. And there were two things we promised them. This is the first, which is a lot of flexibility in terms of who are sponsors, eligible sponsors for mutual funds. So not only does a whole new category of sponsor come in, which is in the name and nature of private equity as well, more importantly, we are now bringing in a concept of self-sponsored AMCs, which means that when an AMC becomes large enough that in itself it is now eligible to sponsor another mutual fund, then there is no need for it to have a sponsor, and it can declare itself to be self-sponsored, and the erstwhile sponsor can disengage and exit without having to find another suitable sponsor to come in and step into its shoes. So we had said earlier that, in our market, we don't like Abhimanyus. Someone who comes in must have the ability to go out, and they shouldn't get stuck. So the same is true for sponsors of mutual funds. They come in as sponsors. Once their children become mature and grown up, they can exit without having to find a new parent for this grown-up child. So this is a very significant liberalization. The second thing which we have promised to the industry, and which is again next year's KRA for us, is what we call MF Lite. So if mutual fund regulations are 100 pages today, the target to the SEBI team is, I want it in 10 pages. And that's going to come for passive funds, because we know that a large amount of our regulation is really around active management. So if somebody wants to come in and only do passive funds, there should be no reason why they have to comply with 90 out of those 100 pages. So only 10 pages will apply. So MF Lite this year when I say this year, in the coming year, is what we are taking on as a KRA for the industry. We then move on to empowerment of the investors. We have, based on various learnings in the recent past, consolidated a set of provisions. A lot of them relate to disclosure. As you know, we are predominantly a disclosure-based regime. We believe that the real role that SEBI has to play is not to tell listed companies what to do, what not to do. That's not what we have been empowered to do by the SEBI Act. However, the principal role that we play is to ensure that there is full and comprehensive disclosure, and that then with that disclosure, the market votes with its feet, votes with its wallets. So material events, we have brought in many provisions, both for comprehensiveness of disclosure as well as timeliness of disclosure. We also have a set of provisions for empowering the shareholders in terms of their approvals. So things which were sort of considered a promoter's lifelong rights, we are now saying that it is not lifelong, and that you do need to go back to your investors periodically and take approvals. So for instance, special rights granted to any shareholder, including promoters. We cannot have perpetuity of special rights. We cannot have perpetuity of board seats. There was a arbitrage. There was a regulatory arbitrage between scheme of arrangement and sump sale. We've now bridged that arbitrage. So essentially empowering the shareholder to make sure that there isn't a perpetual set of rights which the promoters have, which they can take for granted lifelong. There are some more proposals on timeliness of submission and filling up vacancies of directors, largely procedural. And then also some more feedback in terms of at the time of IPOs and bonus issues, there are some procedural issues which we are ironing out. For instance, underwriting. It's very different whether there is hard underwriting or soft underwriting. We are making the rules very clear that if you have an intent to have hard underwriting, it must be disclosed ahead of time. It cannot be done later. Also, in terms of bonus issues, we found that there have been some problems where even before the previous shares issued by the issuer were traded and listed, they came up with bonus issues. Technically, again, letter of the law, there was nothing barring them. Spirit of the law, it was completely wrong. We are now fixing it. We then move on to the debt market, another ease of doing business proposal. This is in the private placement space. We found that there are a large number of issuers who are repeat issuers. And it was completely insane the number of times that they had to file documents again and again and again. And it just didn't make any sense. And therefore, we've now come out with the concept of a general information document which you file the first time, and the validity is valid for a period of a year. And then every time that you want to do an issue, you just ride off of that and issue and give much less disclosure. Somewhat similar to the umbrella prospectus that was there for public issuances. Based on the consultation that we've done with the industry, we believe that this is something that really would address the ease of doing business. And therefore, if you read our the first para in this carefully, you may get a little bit confused because the penultimate sentence says, the same shall facilitate ease of doing business for the issuers. And then it says, comply or explain, and then mandatory. Okay, so you'll wonder that if this is ease of doing business, why does the regulator need to push anyone to do it? People should do it anyway. So our observation is that there are times when when all the parties involved in a transaction are not necessarily not conflicted, and therefore there are times when even what is right for the issuer is not necessarily done, and therefore we want this comply or explain provision to come in so that every issuer has to look at it and say that if SEBI is saying comply or explain, why am I not looking at this route? Why am I looking at the traditional route? So this is really going to move in that direction. Also, there were some disclosure-related parity issues which we are also bridging. So that's, again, somewhat procedural. There are two more provisions in the debt market which are extension of comply or explain. You would know that these were provisions that we had brought in some time back. We feel that given the interest rate cycle right now and given what is really, what is really the context today. So in terms of this 25% incremental borrowing, what we're saying is we're extending. It was a block of 2 years. They were required to achieve something in a block of 2 years. We're now saying that you will have 3 years in which to comply with it. And in terms of certain corporate governance norms, we've gotten feedback from the market on something that we accept is the impossibility of compliance. So there are certain provisions which these companies, it's just impossible for them to comply. So they don't want to be in non-compliance. We are not wanting them to be in non-compliance for technical reasons. So again, going with this whole spirit of what we are interested in is the spirit of the law. We are saying that we will extend this, and in the meanwhile, we will find a solution to the problem of impossibility of compliance. Item number 15 is in the AIF space. Here we have a number of proposals. The first one is very, very important. As you know, some time ago we had said that all AIFs need to submit their data for benchmarking, relative benchmarking, so that there is one objective and transparent metric that the entire industry uses to know how the industry is performing and how does each AIF perform within that industry. At that time itself, there had been discussion that the while the disclosures have been standardized, the valuation norms are not standardized. But we did leave it for another day, saying we'll come back to this, so we've now come back to it. So again, in consultation with the industry, there are now going to be certain standard ways in which the valuation will be done, certain standards will be adopted. We understand that most of the AIFs in any case follow this standard informally, so it will now really not disrupt the market. They will just more formally adopt those standards, and they will do that. But it will give us another strength, I would say, in the comparison of the benchmarking data as to who's performing how. We will now have more comparable data than before. The second is in terms of dematerializing the units. We believe that, we've done this in the securities, in the share bazaar, long ago. We all know the benefits of that. And therefore, we feel that this industry also needs to move into that. The first step we have taken today in terms of saying the units have to be dematerialized. Again, next year's KRA, we will be looking at dematerializing the holdings. So their investee companies will need to dematerialize as well, so that both the asset side and the liability side are held in demat.
And with that, it's a wrap. Stay tuned to CNBC TV18 for more news and updates.